Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Sleepy. Rain makes me sleepy.
Me too.
I feel like we always have a reason for being sleepy every time we get together.
I know.
Today it's hot. Today it's rainy. Today there's always something.
Yep. Today it's Friday morning.
We should have a little spin the wheel every time we start a meeting. Why are we tired today? Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Hello. All right, let me see.
It's like Mike's joining us. Hi, Mike.
Hey, guys.
I know our agenda is always usually pretty much the same, but I'm trying to find the actual one. Yes, we have it.
Hi, Haley.
Right?
Yeah, Haley can screen. Can you screen?
Oh, good.
Haley?
Haley, how was your break? Unmute. You forgot to unmute on vacation?
Sorry.
It doesn't take much. 1 week away is like a revelation.
I know. It felt long. When I got back, I was like, wait, what?
Did you ever come back from vacation? You're just like, oh, I have no idea what any of my passwords are anymore. Oh, man.
Hi, Jerome.
Let's see. Oh, I can't see everybody.
I know it's always like fiddling around with the screen to see who gets on and.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Jerome.
Hey, Alexis.
Hey,
I'm glad it's raining. Actually, it's been so dry.
Mm-hmm. My kids are at outdoor camp, and I'm like, if you want, you can come home early. They're like, nah.
Where are they?
Camp Kuwant.
Oh, that's where I went for a little bit. Well, I went for a while when I was a kid. Sophie went for 1 year, but they have good alternatives. Yeah.
They do, and they love it. Like, they were just like, we get to leave the house this week.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Aww.
Hey, Sarah.
I'm sure we'll be quick as we always are. Right? Hello, Alexis. Good to see you, Sarah. Everybody looks good. Everybody looks healthy.
How are you doing?
Haley, were you at the Delaware beaches?
Yep, I was in Rehoboth.
Wow.
We stayed in our house.
Yeah.
And we were not super near the main beaches. We were back a little bit, so even when we went to the beach, it wasn't as crowded.
Good.
But, yeah, and then the mask restrictions got more strict while we were there.
That's right, and then they took them away when you left.
I'm the single spreader of.
He did it because of you. That's funny. Oh man, what time is it?
I saw your jersey plates, Haley.
I know, right? Exactly.
Well, at least it was going that way. So now I want to give you a hard time in terms of like restrictions. We were going to take a day trip yesterday. We're shore people in my family, so I don't know if I'm supposed to admit that publicly, but we didn't go because they don't want us. They want us, they want Delawareans to quarantine everywhere now. So I was like, fine. Yep. I was pretty upset about it. I have to be honest.
Yeah, that's called a 14-day vacation. Take it.
Yeah, is it? Is it though? If you're stuck, I mean, yeah.
You're stuck at the shore, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it definitely eliminates day trip options. So that was a bummer.
Yeah, I know. I'm at my parents' house right now, and I got here right before Delaware was added to New Jersey's quarantine list. So I think technically I'm supposed to be here for 14 days, but I got here before the order. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh man. Wow.
Okay. I didn't pack for this.
We'll see if they let you back in. Maybe we'll do like a retaliatory,
Yeah.
And you'll just be stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's 10:33. I guess we can. Should we wait or should we? I know that Matt can't join us. And I don't see any of our other. Oh, wait, there's Ray. Hey, Ray.
We have a co-chair from every work group here today.
Oh, we do. Oh, there's Nandi.
Namdi.
He's here as well.
All right, perfect. I forget to check. I don't hear the little, when you're the host, you hear everybody enter. And so when I don't, then I just get confused. Okay, so this is perfect. We're ready to go. All right, good morning, everybody. Long time no see. We are racing towards our next steps. It seemed like, there was a lot of non-action due to forces beyond our control. And now we are a couple of weeks away from several of our work groups reconvening, and only a month away from coming together as a full work group, or a full consortium rather. So the first thing on the agenda is to focus upon that. And we have our date of August 13th and, 5 to 7 p.m. So we need to be thinking about what that agenda is going to look like for that consortium meeting. I know that the expectation is that all of our work groups will have an opportunity to have met. So I would think a significant amount of our time would be spent in updates, but wanted to hear from folks a little bit about, if there's anything in particular that you think that we should be prioritizing for discussion at that meeting beyond our work group agenda. I think from my perspective, I think we need to be able to talk about our path forward. We know that, we're still in this limbo with the redistricting conversation. I think assuming we have substantive meetings for the work groups that will have some recommended direction as alternatives to that. I don't have a strong expectation that we're going to be able to say, and a month or two ago I might have said something different, that maybe redistricting could bounce back in September in some way, but so we know on a recalibration mode with redistricting. So I think what we are going to want to orient towards, and this is something Matt and I have talked about, is, what is our next big deliverable as a consortium? And we had talked about having an opportunity to, to deliver some real priorities in December for legislative action, but also I would think budgetary priorities. So I think our next sort of goal point would be, what do we think we as a consortium through our work groups deliver for that? I think obviously there's been a ton of conversation around education and priorities and commitments being made from our districts, from the governor. The governor has taken a significant leadership role with the Southern Regional Education Board as well. So we just want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity of everything that's happened this year to really lean into what we think our top priorities for action would be on equity in the school system. And so I think to the extent that we can get folks excited about an opportunity that we have to deliver, fiscal and policy priorities in December to the governor and to my colleagues, I think we should do that. And then I think, obviously there's also, to what extent do we want to engage with just topics in equity that are proliferating all around us, and how do we as a consortium want to pull that into our work? So I don't know if that's something that we want to open ourselves up to in terms of a discussion, but I mean, we have, whether it's, we lightly, I would say, touched on the impact of COVID at our last meeting. We maybe didn't have as robust a discussion as we thought that we would. People were still pretty shell-shocked. But of course, since then, we've seen all of the civil rights demonstrations, the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of youth movement, specifically around experiences of racism in schools. So a lot of things are going on that I certainly don't think that we should be ignoring. But I do think as a consortium, we have to be clear about how we recognize those and how we incorporate those into what we can do as a consortium that's focused on state level policy making and partnership with our LEAs to advance good policy as well. So that's just kind of my ramble of what, you know, this next touch point I think should make clear to our members, but I'm open, I guess, to folks.
This is Jerome.
Hi, Jerome.
What you're thinking about the issues relating to reopening the schools and all that, and then also the connectivity issues that were raised last spring with remote learning and so forth.
I mean, I think those are, we know more now than I guess we did at our May meeting about, you know, what the guidelines are starting to look like and what the challenges are going to continue to be. And so I think I still think that's still worth having everyone discuss. I mean, I think I've been sitting on the equity committee for the school reopening. What was really clear there in terms of talking about equity related to instruction was that there are still significant concerns, obviously, about you know, broadband infrastructure and devices being available. I'm hearing that, you know, from colleagues on that committee, but also from just community members. So there's a lot, people just don't feel like they have answers about whether or not that's going to be provided for. And then, you know, I think on the educator side, there's just a lot of questions about whether or not it's effective, whether or not it's good for the social emotional side of everything to be leaning on virtual, but then everything is still up in the air in terms of whether it's safe to not a significant amount of virtual. The other thing that was coming up a lot in terms of equity is really just the same things that have always come up, but seeing the pandemic situation as enhancing it, which is really, you know, there are very clear segments of our student population who we're not doing a good job of reaching, both like literally reaching them in terms of communications and relationship building, whether it's students experiencing homelessness or challenging home environments and, you know, various things related to their low socioeconomic status, that not only isn't happening, but really isn't happening as a result of a lack of capacity at the LEA and school level, that people were really clamoring in that committee for that to be addressed because it's always needed. Now it's even more urgent. And then I think as a corollary to that, you know, we're also hearing folks talking about students not being engaged with just the content that's being delivered. You know, it's more challenging in a virtual environment to get people to be engaged, but then if there's a lack of sort of cultural responsiveness, I guess, in the content and curriculum, that is showing up even more. So those are I would say those are the biggest themes. It's sort of like the practical side of connectivity, the relationship piece and the capacity to build and strengthen and maintain relationships with students from challenging backgrounds, and then whether or not what's actually being, you know, taught and how it's being taught is able to really be part of that relationship building. So I feel like those are the major themes that I am hearing. I know that the state is really prioritizing the broadband infrastructure in terms of how they're spending CARES Act money, but there's not a lot of transparency around the expenditure of CARES Act money yet. I actually had a conversation yesterday with Emily Cunningham, and she said that they are working on having a website that will make transparent how the governor's office is spending their $40 million, how the Department of Education is spending their, I think it's $10 million, and how the LEAs are spending their CARES Act money as well. Because I think the public wants to, I mean, to the extent that the public knows that that money is there to be spent, I think that they are very interested in seeing how it's being spent and deserve to. So hopefully we'll see that sooner rather than later.
I think that.
Go ahead, Tika.
I think the biggest challenge that I seem to notice from families, not as much as obtaining the device, because there was a lot of people or organizations that came through and collectively we arranged for it. But what was a bigger hurdle is people didn't know how to use the devices.
Sure.
and access programs appropriately and move in between them. So aside from just content knowledge, but also just platforms. And I think, you know, more training. I know through PIC, we started trying to do some things in other agencies, but more training on how to navigate these platforms or use devices and just troubleshoot, or even if there was like a hub to call if you have issues where you're not just on a long wait line with, you know, Microsoft or something like that, something a little bit more locally based. And then in terms of our agenda too, I was wondering, so with the, you know, original legislation and mandate, there was timelines to follow. So how are we doing with that? Does legislation need to be amended? Are we, you know, on track? And then my third thing was when you were mentioning the racism and the civil rights and stuff, and I remember at our first meeting, one of the points that Dusty brought up was systemic racism in institutions. And we had a little bit of a conversation. So I don't know if that ever went anywhere or if it's in a parking lot, but maybe bringing that part back to the table then.
Yeah, I don't know if we've been continue to be explicit about that either. And I think that's, I mean, I'd like to hear from, I know we've got, you know, Ray and Namdi and Eugene on here too, but I think we should. I think it would be very strange for us not to make space to talk very explicitly about what we're seeing in that, whether it's, you know, the SRO conversations that are happening, the student sort of whistleblowing that's happening around their experiences in our public schools. I mean, I think everything that we're doing is meant to get at resolving that, but I don't know that we've been explicit about it. And I think there's an opportunity to do that more than we did before. But what that looks like, I think I would love feedback on.
Yeah.
So you kind of remind me that I think on the agenda, we should have space to address, yes, the timeline and how that needs to be altered, which would have to be done legislatively. I think the expectation is just that we do that when we go back in January. We didn't get an automatic extension because of the way our legislation is specifically arranged in the two pieces. We weren't like a task force that just gets an extension. We actually have it's actually our powers that need an extension that were established in a specific bill. So yeah, I think Namdi and I would have to talk about that and what the new timeline would look like. Oh, thanks, Haley. And then, sorry, the Department of Education has the reorganizing that has been done. The Division Office of Innovation and Improvement is now the Office of Equity and Innovation, I believe. And Jim Simmons is now like the chief equity officer. I don't even know the exact, I can't recall his exact.
It's
chief equity officer. And did you want to say more to that, Ray, or more to anything?
No, I don't want to say more to that because he's still figuring out his team and what his priorities are going to be. He is a part of the Wilmington Center for Education Equity, so he was, you know, in that figuring out stage. But what I would like to weigh in on is the question that you raised around being explicit around, we wouldn't be talking about equity and driving for equity if we didn't have a system of that has systemic racism. And I think that it needs to be lifted up in a very overt ways through all of the work of this consortium. Otherwise it's disingenuous. It's real, it exists. We wouldn't have children divided among 4 school districts if it were not a manifestation of matters dealing with race. So I do have some ideas around instructional practice with the educators work group that I'll share with Mike and Noel when we meet. We're going to be meeting soon. And I think that the initial conversation has been a good one. Teachers, and I'm generalizing, are not prepared to deal with content that deals with the history of cultural groups in America, and they're just not prepared to deal with topics around racism. And these kids are already aware, but they have a heightened awareness, and now their concerns that they've talked among themselves and with their parents have been validated by the unrest in this country. And so students are going to come to school. They're going to return to school, or they're going to be involved in remote learning. Hopefully, that they will be involved more than they have been when they fell off. And they're going to be raising those issues. And I think it's a really important moment and a critical moment for educators to be better prepared than they have been in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And to your one point, one of the just sort of things rattling around in my brain has been, you know, when we talk about, we have this moment to be more explicit because it's being demanded, and should be, is sort of like, well, for me, like, is equity or equity and anti-racism the same thing? You know, is all equity work inherently anti-racist, or is that a subset of equity work? I think, you know, maybe that's sort of an agenda discussion item way to sort of start that conversation for us as a group that is nominally committed to educational equity. Does that mean, you know, being explicitly anti-racist, and what does that look like for the work of our work groups? I think it would be good to have that as a segment of our discussion. I mean, we have a 2-hour meeting, I think we would be remiss not to spend a significant amount of time on sort of our definition of equity and how that aligns with specifically confronting systemic racism and committing to anti-racist policy making.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I heard Namdi and Fran. Go ahead, Fran, then Namdi.
Namdi, you go first, and then I'll follow.
Oh, Namdi, go first.
I appreciate it. Now, my point was definitely just in agreement with that point of really saying one of the things that has really touched me during this whole, you know, period of transition, or what you want to call where we are from COVID and then going to the civil unrest, is really looking at the positions where the districts have found themselves. And when you read their statements of from the superintendents, to me, every one of them ended the same way, saying, we're going to look to do this. And I'm like, there's no look to do. We've already started this work. What you really need to do is re-engage with the Redding Consortium. That was my response to all of them, saying everything you said that you wanted to do to ensure that your district is doing the best it can, you can begin by re-engaging in the Redding conversation. And that's point blank. It's the same conversation. There's no difference between this or that. You don't want to have the redistricting conversation. We get it. But there are points of this conversation that we can begin with and that must begin with right now.
Yes, I want to respond to that, but Fran, I want you to have your opportunity to speak first.
Well, I had to step aside for a couple seconds. I may have missed that, but I did hear Ray's point, and I think it's important. But I think it goes beyond just teachers being prepared. I've been working around this issue for about 2 years now at the state and national level, and the challenge for teachers is that a lot of academics will say that teachers should have, you know, courage and be mavericks and go in and talk about these topics. But the reality is that sometimes, and more often than not, when teachers venture down into roads of talking about these, you know, sensitive issues, they risk wrath of saying something that's misinterpreted. And as a consequence, I mean, my point ultimately is that the courts have spoken to this a little bit. And, you know, when you're dealing with a teacher who goes off the curriculum, there was a court case in 7th District Court, like 2007. And a teacher went off script a little bit, got herself in trouble, her contract wasn't renewed. And the courts basically said that teachers are hired speech, and if they deviate from the curriculum, they do so at their own peril. My point for raising that is it's not just a matter of teachers not being prepared, it's a matter of school districts needing to put in place curriculum that provide safeguards for teachers who are at risk if they are doing something, engaging in conversations with students that are not part of the written curriculum.
Yeah.
It gets beyond, you're right, it's about the teachers, but it's also about district needing to develop curriculum and the state developing a curriculum that has that.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. I didn't want to go on and on, but I'm real clear that it's not just teachers.
Yeah.
And teachers don't have a curriculum that's relevant to brown and black
That's
students.
right.
And so I'm very well aware of that, and thank you for underscoring that. I just didn't want to, make a speech because I can. I just wanted to give like a quick example. Yeah. And even what you mentioned about teachers, even their own personal experiences and their feelings and their trepidation around, what to say and what not to say, that is the part of preparation. It's not just about the curriculum either. It's like, who am I as a human being, and how can I increase my comfort and my competence and my knowledge of content that even we haven't been taught, or ourselves. So we have to unpack it. And I think that this is the group to unpack it. If this group doesn't push, it's not going to happen. These are not new conversations.
Mm-hmm. I know, and I think we do. We have an awesome opportunity, and I think the educators work group does, and we'll go to work group updates in a second. But it sounds like there's a lot, we made the decision in May to extend the work of the educators work group. So of course the next step is to figure out, what does that look like? Is that about engaging with our community stakeholders to find out, this and that and the other thing, what are the priorities? And it sounds like you guys are happening upon potentially, based on what the work group wants to do, some very clear goals for the direction that might go. I wanted to circle back a little bit to Namdi's point, because it reminds me of something that Superintendent Green said to me in a recent conversation about response to the student whistleblower Instagrams and stuff like that. And he was, he was really talking about the need to work essentially regionally across LEAs on certain efforts, that it doesn't make sense for each district to maybe be doing some of this work in silos. And it reminded me of some of the early conversations we had as a consortium, where we wanted to be, clear, I think, about what type of recommendations and policy facilitation work we can do. We know that we have the power to make legislative recommendations and really focus on what are the state level, levers of equity. But we also talked about how do we work on getting our districts together. We obviously have a very clear mandate to look at restructuring districts, but I think we also talked about the concept of compacts. Maybe there's other types of concepts, but ways to create collaboration across districts on policies that, for the good of our most vulnerable student groups would be, they'd be very well served to have districts on the same page about some things. And so I think, to Namdi's point, I think we need to look at on these issues, how do we bring these districts seriously back to the table in accordance with what they have stated they're committed to on redistricting, but I think also on what other issues can they collaborate on in the 3 to 5 years that we might have to wait for any kind of actual governance change to happen. We know they can be doing things together now. And so it's sort of how can we utilize the consortium to facilitate that, other than just have that happening, in disparate ways. So I think that would be a good thing for us to wrap our heads around.
I just wanted, yes. I just wanted to say, I agree. And I believe you and I are on the other committee. We were on the previous committee, the Reopening Schools committee, where this actually came up almost every other session because of the fact that with COVID-19, many of the students are not the instability that's creating within households, foreclosures, things of that nature. And so you're going to have a lot of students that will be transferring from or moving across the street and essentially going from one district into another. So I think it is prime now. I agree totally with Representative Chikwocha and the other comments that were said earlier, but I think it's prime now to bring the districts back to the table, especially with COVID-19, to start having this discussion as to what are we going to do almost like in the midterm, you know, not, as you said, not waiting another 5 or 6 years, but also understanding the urgency and intensity and intentionality that we have to put to this because of the fact of COVID-19 has kind of, you know, turned a lot of this stuff on its head. And we have to be able to make adjustments, not later, but now, because we're going to have students that are going to be slipped through a lot of cracks as more instability increases in many of our hardest hit neighborhoods already.
Absolutely. So because we are on the agenda item of the agenda, I mean, are we thinking, I mean, is speaking to the need for LEA collaboration, I mean, is that an agenda topic?
I think it's a topic, but I think that how the topic is approached is really important. To have a set of open-ended questions to see what kind of nest suite, and to see what kind of collaboration that they are doing in terms of reopening planning. You know, DOE has those groups, but you know, in my conversations with at least one superintendent, the kind of coordination that he would like to see is not going on. But I think that rather than assume that it's not going on, I think we have to ask a couple of open-ended questions and see what, from their perspective, where the opportunities lie.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be better. I mean, we should ask them first, obviously, but if we decide we want to put it on the agenda, I think it would definitely be better to come from, you know, them. and Jarrell obviously is, you know, I've heard him speak to it. We know he's, you know, has a great way of approaching that. So maybe he, you know, obviously Jeff is the co-chair of one of our work groups. Maybe that's something that they might be willing to lead.
I can't speak to all the districts, but I know Brandywine has created their own subcommittee and created positions around it, and looking at revising curriculum and things like that. So I feel, and maybe just because that's my district, so I get more information about it, but I do feel like they're trying to be more proactive now than reactive. And maybe they could share some about what their new committee's doing. One of the questions I do have looking at the makeup of the committee, that I'll talk with them further, is if they're going to have parent representatives, because currently they're all just school district employees.
People, sure.
And students.
Okay. So I know what's did I hear someone?
No, you heard me moaning.
Oh. On the engagement piece. So I think I know we probably need to do a little work on that, Haley, but what I'm hearing is I'm sort of hearing maybe three distinct things that we want to make sure are approached on the agenda. Well, more than that. Obviously, our strategy for adjusting the timeline, if we feel like that needs to be explicitly stated, that I don't think is going to be an extensive thing. Just we're going to have to do legislation in June and probably back burner that. But it sounds like the bigger topics are sort of the, you know, equity and anti-racism conversation, what our districts are committing to, you know, and how we think that fits into our work. And I think related, but maybe a little bit distinct, you know, talking about the cross-LEA collaboration on policy making. It could be a topic led by some of our superintendents, if they are willing. What did I miss that came up? Did I miss anything? So those are just some broad thoughts. I don't know if we want to kind of sketch together an actual literal agenda.
What about your you talked about
the DOE change?
But I was going to say about the funding, asking for some transparency around plans for spending those dollars.
I think that could, I mean, I actually think that and the change in the Office of Innovation and Equity could maybe be, we could ask Jim to talk about Department of Education updates and maybe have him speak to transparency around CARES Act spending as well as the equity changes.
Isn't Susan on the Redding Consortium?
She is. I mean, she could do it too. but they could do it together. But I mean, maybe have sort of a DOE update on those two topics.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So it's kind of 3 clear.
This is Jerome again. DOE just came out with a survey results on remote learning this week. I don't know if how many of you have seen that. We have copies of it.
Oh.
We can circulate that.
What is it?
It was a survey of parents, students, teachers, etc., on experience with remote learning from the last spring, and DOE just sent out the results this week.
Yeah, that could be a good update as well. I'm sure people will want to hear COVID related. I mean, CARES Act, obviously, but okay.
We can circulate that to everybody in case they didn't see it.
Yeah, if you can send that to all of us, that would be really helpful. And Tika, I'll forward it to you if you're not on that distribution list.
Is it a DOE survey or a Rodell Foundation survey?
DOE.
Oh.
DOE.
And
actually, two
uploaded.
2 people who are on contract from the University of Delaware that do data research for
the link's in the chat box.
I don't know if you can click on it. Oh,
Thanks, Fran. I just pulled it up quickly on my. Oh wait. Pulled it up quickly on my
cool.
from my email, but I can send it around to everyone.
That'd be really helpful. Is that enough sort of the start on agenda, knowing that we'll revisit next Friday? Okay, so that's sort of some broad brushes, and then we'll start to hammer it down to a more clear agenda and sort of who's going to be doing what and all that kind of stuff. But I think that gives us a sense of content. All right, let's move into
Tiffany, not as an agenda item for August, but to help to kind of catalyze some of the conversations that we know need to be had. I'm going to share slides from a national conference that I participated in yesterday, is specifically posing questions that we should be asking around school reopenings through a racial equity lens, as well as the broader conversations that we should be having and what we should be tracking as advocates for. And I know that this is not the way that you articulate it, but this is the work that I do for advocates for Brown and Black students. I'll share that with this group, and it might be helpful to frame some of the work group, the next leg of the work group conversations.
Great, awesome. All right, so you can be as brief or specific as you want, but work group updates. Mike, are you still with us?
He had to step off.
Oh shoot.
Just missed him.
You
He
wanna
like
speak for
just
him,
stepped
Kelly?
off.
Sorry.
That's okay. And Fran, please jump in as well.
And Fran, yes.
We met yesterday with the co-chairs to draft out the next meeting and kind of look at where the work group is in the process that we've been using and where they want to move forward with the work. Again, the conversation Ray was having earlier and talking about did come up with the group, and how do we move that forward. They're also expanding membership, so I know that the co-chairs are reaching out to a couple of potential new members, teachers, HR directors, students.
Oh good, I was gonna say students.
Yes,
Okay.
students. There's no transportation issue in the light of Zoom meetings, so.
I know, it's great. And there's so many students. There's so many students stepping into their leadership lately.
So we're working on an agenda to explore where they want to move now in light of everything going on. And also looking at the recommendations we had, what require legislation versus don't require legislation and could possibly be moved forward before December. We may have to reframe some of them as well. So
sure.
A big conversation with some hopefully new members.
Great. And are you expecting to onboard new members at the next meeting? at the upcoming meeting, or is that?
I believe they're trying to. So they're supposed to reach yesterday, today, to talk to them and have them at least come and listen to this meeting, and then decide if they're not sure. But
good idea.
Had mentioned to Noelle being interested, and a couple have reached out to us as well. So
yeah, that's great. That's a good strategy to get more people at the meeting itself, and then see if that generates.
Exactly. So, Fran, do you have anything to add?
No, just did you mention the date? Was it July 21st?
It's July 21st, 4 to 5:30. We're trying to keep it focused and not over Zoom everybody. And we're going to have some, hopefully, activities to do, maybe breakouts or different ways. So.
Yeah. I know we're all so Zoom tired that it gets harder and harder to keep it engaging, which makes us also sympathetic to our educators. Okay, funding committee, work group. Eugene, Namdi, what do you got?
Eugene and I have to still get together. We haven't touched base in a minute, but I mean, on my end, I can say there's been communication with, we had three, Brandywine, Red Clay, and Christina school districts in regards to a willingness to be involved on our committee in pursuing mainly the invite sent to them dealt with saying we're going to look at information regarding Newcastle County tax pool, the referendum legislation from Earl Jakes, and then just funding, overall general funding, especially for high need schools. And again, they all have suggested that they are willingness to participate. So just I need to follow up there, and Eugene and I get on the same page and begin just get that direction for that work.
Okay.
And I would have had a couple conversations with a couple administrators, and also spoken to a couple people through the work of the reopening schools, the equity and reopening schools conversations that we work group that we've been on for the last 5 weeks about some of the conversations around some of these issues and how they all tie together. So our representative coach and I will probably sit down sometime soon, or rather Zoom each other sometime soon, and just get everything lined up, and we'll have something move forward.
Okay.
I can give a quick update just about the research front. So myself, Sarah, Alexis, Simone, Chris, and Joe have all been sort of working behind the scenes doing some just compiling funding information. I've looked at sort of COVID and equity related funding stuff. Alexis has looked at a lot of Delaware state funding information. Simone, Chris, and Joe have been looking at the Newcastle County Tax District. So we have a nice sort of compiled sort of like annotated bibliography document of a lot of those resources. So we're sort of starting that, we're following that decision-making model in terms of collecting research and local data. And then Joe and Chris specifically have had conversations with people about the tax district. And they feel, we met with them yesterday, they feel comfortable now in sort of explaining what the tax district is, how it functions now, which is really good. They've been doing a lot of work, so it was great to hear. And then they want more information sort of on the history of it and its original purpose versus how the purpose has changed and like sort of changed over time. So there's definitely been movement, and I think we'll have more information for Eugene and Namdi very soon to help just provide information about what they want to share with the work group.
Okay. So is the priority just to sort of do that like baseline education on these different facets of funding to start with, right? The sort of the tax pool, the referendum system, and then just sort of general funding inequities, how the structure currently works and doesn't. And that would be for the work group. And then I think at some point we want to deliver that to the broader consortium, right? For public consumption.
Like sort of that funding 101 we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be later in the fall, it sounds like, or post August. Okay. That's helpful. Anybody have any questions for that group? I think this topic is definitely starting to heat up. I'm hearing a lot. I feel like I see a lot of folks saying, you know, when are we going to fix how we fund our schools? And I keep saying that is on the list of things that are being explored within Redding, and, you know, stay tuned. But it is, you know, as we know, not a shallow dive, I guess we would say.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the ACLU having a presentation or a conversation next week around some of this?
Is that next week?
I don't know. I saw something in my email, and
if you can find that, definitely send that to us. Handy. Mm-hmm. They're doing like a sort of funding basics.
I think it's like a symposium around like funding, and it's like, I think it's their annual meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
But they're talking about that and a few other.
Yeah, and I've heard that, I know there was a group of Christina School District community members that recently got together to talk about the referendum system and things like that. So there's definitely movement that we want to make sure we ultimately capture. So that's good. I'll look that up, and maybe that's something we can share on the Facebook page for folks too. Okay, so then our newest committee, Ray, I think you are, and Jason as the staff person, you want to speak to what's going on there?
Okay, so Jeff Menzer and myself are co-chairing what is a working title, the Social Determinants for Student Success Work Group. And we'll be having our first meeting on July 23rd. There are, I think, roughly 15 members, both current consortium members as well as people that are working in various strands to provide services, community-based services, as well as school-based services to students and families. And we're going to have a briefing on to set the foundation for the Redding Consortium's work, and we're gonna have a visioning exercise to kick off just the thinking of the group, and that's pretty much all I can report on right now.
That would be that's the 23rd?
The 23rd of July.
Great. Anyone have any particular questions?
Jason, did you want to add anything?
Yeah.
No, you covered it.
Yeah.
July 23rd, I think it's 5 to 7, right? Did we say 5 to 7 or?
Well, I hope not, but if you say so.
Or 5 to 6. Oh, you wanted to be 75
minutes.
An hour and a half tops.
Right.
I said 75 minutes, frankly.
Yeah.
It's a good goal.
So starting at 5 and then 75 minutes from there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. I look forward to seeing, I can't believe that's in, a week and a half. So anyone have any other questions around work group updates? I guess we still need a date for the next for funding to come together as a work group, right?
Yep.
Is there any question around the composition of that committee?
I think there was conversation about adding the CFOs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm not sure about other additions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we have so far. Been conversation with superintendents about the three I mentioned. So those CEOs are engaged.
Okay. I think it'll just be important for us to get a date for that, maybe to drive the other planning elements. The sooner we can. It would be wonderful to have that before. I don't know if it's realistic still, but to be able to do that before the full meeting so that, in some form we can say that, we can have a sense of what this newly convened group is talking about and laying out priorities for that. So even if we could do it just maybe in the week before, I don't know if that's feasible, but could we try to get a date?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Eugene and I will look at it, and we'll definitely press for that as the goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
All right. Okay. So
Just remember our 2 week, we have to post a week
in advance, right?
in advance.
Yeah. So maybe looking at August, the first week of August, to just orient, because it's a whole new topic area that we need direction on. Okay. So I know we got a bit of update on the research underway under the funding umbrella. Is there any other research updates that we need to talk about?
Do you want to share the Schott Foundation report with the leadership team here?
I think that would be great. It did. I don't know how many of you are on the mailing list for the Schott Foundation. Haley, you're familiar with it, I know.
I think I have it really easily accessible.
Oh, good. Ray, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Let's circulate it, and then you can talk about it, Tizzy.
Okay. I'm gonna wait for my dog to stop barking. But they have an index of a variety of non-educational, thank you, Haley, metrics that they look at, essentially. So looking really at like inputs to consider on what kind of supports we have. Sorry, guys. In place to ensure students are more likely to be successful in schools. And so they just released the newest report on the basis of that. And it's just something that we've been looking at for a few years. And I think it's really good food for thought in terms of what underpins equity. So I haven't read the whole report yet. Ray, have you?
I scanned through it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be good for everybody to take a look. I mean, we weren't planning to send it to consortium members or anything like that, but I think
just for the leadership.
For the leadership, it's a really great, it's a great study of what does it really take to ensure student success. And I think particularly for the new work group, which is looking sort of beyond the classroom, and what kind of policies can we promote that will support educational equity but aren't specific to instruction or actual educational policy, I think is something that we should all be thinking about and have the right to do that. So Haley, I don't know if you want to make sure everybody in the leadership team has it if they don't already, but I think it would be, and I know you just put a link up, maybe we can email it too.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll email all the links from the chat back out to everyone.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so that's the Loving Cities Index. So various other types of policies, whether it's transportation, housing, are being considered in a community. Cool. And so everything else I think was more or less covered. I know we also have, because we did get funded, we now have to go through the process of approving the scope of work. So that's something that Matt and I are looking at, and we'll go through our process of giving you guys feedback on that so we can approve it and get it where it needs to go. So if nobody has anything else, thank you, Kelly. Cool. All right, if no one has anything else, I guess we can go to public comment. If anyone wants to comment, raise your hand or wave your hand or just unmute yourself and say hey. So we'll give it a minute. And if not, I think we are set for today. All right. Hearing no comment, I think it's safe to say thank you, as always. I'm kind of excited. I'm very excited, actually, about what it looks like it's going. So give that some thought, and next week we will dig a little deeper on forming that agenda. And hopefully we'll have a date set for the funding committee to talk about next week, and go from there. Awesome. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Stay well, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yep.
Wait, I can't hear you, Kelly.
I'm gonna see if it'll let me end and make you the host, and then if you end it. Make this up. Let's see what it does. All right.